Now, in typically robust form, the Sun commentator Trevor Kavanagh today lashed out at the police raids over the weekend in which 5 Sun journalists were arrested. It appears to be a watershed moment in the police investigation, with senior figures at the Sun being questioned after information which came apparently from inside the parent company. Is this global media empire now at war with itself, or is it, as Mr Kavanagh called it, a witch hunt and a threat to press freedom? We'll debate all that in a moment. First, here's Peter Marshall.
This feels like a witch hunt. There's a mass hysteria going on now.
This is going to be a grey cloud hanging over News Corp for the next several years.
The Sun came out this morning with heartfelt pleas for justice for the Sun.
Its journalists are being treated like members of an organised crime gang.
The words of Trevor Kavanagh, its senior writer.
Some of the greatest legends in Fleet Street have been held, at least on the basis of evidence so far revealed, for simply doing their jobs as journalists on behalf of the company.
Whether they're from red-top tabloids or TV programmes late at night on the BBC, journalists have a tendency to self-mythologise. We're all legends in our own lunchtime. And defenders of the Sun say the wave of arrests at their newspaper are now threatening the very freedom of the press.
Why do they have to do these dawn raids? Why have we got 171 policemen on this case? It's a complete and utter overkill.
How many policemen do you think should be involved in the case?
Well, I certainly don't think 171. And also, if it's true that this particular case is about whether our soldiers have the right equipment, I would say that there's a public interest defence here, just the same as there was into the inquiry over MPs' expenses.
Others who've taken on News International say without knowing what's being investigated, it's far too early to claim a public interest defence.
I don't think it is a witch hunt. I know why the Sun journalists themselves might perceive it as being a witch hunt, but if the police think that there is a group of witches somewhere, then of course they've got to hunt for them. They can't decide that they will investigate and interview some of them but not others. They've got to look for the whole lot of people.
Isn't it overkill though when you've got 20 police officers raiding journalists' houses at dawn?
Well, it's a bit rich in a way for the Sun to complain about dawn raids. They used to attend dawn raids on other people.
4 of the journalists arrested at the weekend were senior editorial staff, the reputed legends. But Trevor Kavanagh, who wrote today's Cri de Coeur, said they've been dropped in it, implicated in alleged wrongdoing by News International's parent company, News Corp.
A large number of extremely good journalists who have worked very loyally for the company for a very long time are, as the company itself has announced publicly, often in police cells for long periods of time on the basis of evidence provided by the company.
News Corp is the American base of Murdoch's media empire, and shareholders there are deeply concerned that the scandal in his British papers is now threatening Murdoch's entire show. America's Foreign and Corrupt Practices Act bans all payments to foreign officials overseas, and the FBI has been investigating for over 6 months.
The conduct at issue now with these recent allegations are broader in scope. We now have an additional newspaper and thus a different part of the company that's going to be the focus of inquiry. And we now have a much broader category of, quote, foreign officials that were allegedly the recipients of payments, including a Ministry of Defense official and others in the military.
That's why we're going fast.
Last summer, Rupert Murdoch flew into the UK to give his endorsement to News International's Rebecca Wade. She then resigned. He's back in London this week, presumably to support worried staff at the Sun.
And those people who are hoping that the Sun will close down or go out of business, they should be careful what they wish for, because without the Sun, there'll be no Times and there'll be no Sunday Times, because the profits from the Sun subsidise it. The rest of the broadsheet newspaper industry is absolutely on its knees. We need a free and a varied press in this country, and the Sun is a part of that free and varied press.
Sources in America say James Murdoch, Rupert's son, is increasingly unlikely to persuade shareholders their business could be safe in his hands. And across the Murdoch media, law enforcement will want questions answered.
They typically ask the where else question. In other words, were payments like this occurring in other News Corp businesses or subsidiaries, including all over the world? That's why inquiries like this can generally take several years. Another thing they'll be asking is, what did the executive officers know and when did they know it? Did they participate in any of the wrongdoing? Did they authorize any of the improper payments? Did they have knowledge of any of the improper payments but failed to put a stop to them? Are some of the questions U.S. authorities will be asking.
The Metropolitan Police tonight issued a statement saying no more than 10 officers were used in each raid on the homes of Sun journalists. They add they don't believe the level of resources devoted to their 3 inquiries is in any way disproportionate to what they call the enormous task in hand.
Peter Marshall reporting there. I'm joined now by the broadcaster Nick Ferrari, who worked for The Sun a few years ago, the lawyer Charlotte Harris, who's represented victims of phone hacking, and from New York by Michael Wolff, who has written a biography of Rupert Murdoch and who today urged him to sell The Sun. Nick, first of all, I mean, it's hardly a witch hunt if the police follow the evidence, go where it leads and make arrests if they feel it's necessary.
But it's the manner, isn't it? Everything in proportion. Of course, there probably has been some wrongdoing. Indeed, people have been arrested. But it is the way it is done. We are now living in a country which my listeners won't believe, I would imagine your viewers will find difficult to believe, where Abu Qatada can walk free on the streets of Britain, but as long as we're banging up the picture editor of the Sun newspaper. It is ridiculous. The Met Police tonight are saying they used at least 10 officers per arrest. 50 police officers this weekend at a time when there's drugs going on, there's real crime. Do we really need 50 coppers?
But even if Abu Qatada is a case that really gets people worked up, doesn't mean to say this is trivial.
But it's proportionate, isn't it? Did they honestly think that one of these guys I know very, very well, I'm proud to say I know John Kay, a brilliant journalist. He's, I think, in his 60s. What do they think he's going to do? Run off or something? This is ridiculous.
It's overkill. It's serious overkill.
I don't think that anyone was really going to run away, and I admit that, and I agree that 10 police officers did seem somewhat excessive, but I don't think that was the only point that the article that's caused all of this discussion today was making. And as it happens, it's quite interesting because, of course, the Sun have never been particularly proportionate in themselves in the way that they present.
So that's an excuse then, is it?
It's not necessarily an excuse, but to an extent, it is quite rich. It is quite interesting watching this shocked response. Of course, the police have to follow up. That's very, very important. We've spent 6 years.
More police officers than investigated Lockerbie, that investigated Madeleine McCann, that investigated the July 7th bombings. More police officers directed to the Sun now.
This is a Murdoch smokescreen. This is classic Murdoch stuff. You're missing the entire point. Was there a crime? That's the only issue here. It doesn't really matter how many police officers are devoted to finding a crime if there was a crime.
I agree.
The crime. Are you guilty?
Right.
Are you guilty?
You're not, Michael, you're not listening. I am saying, of course, if there's a crime, these guys have to be investigated.
Okay,
for your knowledge, they pulled police officers. I'm talking. They pulled police officers. Let me just say this, Michael. Michael, let me just say this.
One at a time.
This is Murdoch stuff.
They pulled police officers off London 2012, Michael. They pulled police officers off that beat. Now, are you justifying that?
Would you just focus on your own crime?
Well, I don't think anybody thinks Mr. Ferrari's committed a crime, but Michael Wolff, has the information behind this come from News Corp? And if so, what do you think is actually going on within that organisation?
And I apologize. I thought Mr. Ferrari worked for the Sun, but if he does not, I apologize. Yes. I mean, clearly this is coming from inside News Corp, and I'll tell you from the American side. I mean, what's going on inside this company is that virtually the entire American operation has had it with the Brits. There's no upside that they can say, everybody but Rupert himself, that they can see in maintaining the British operation here. The British operation, from every point of view within News Corp, is poison, and it will not be rehabilitated. Nobody believes that. They see it now purely as downside. And their approach now, which is different from the past number of years, is to say, let it all out. Let these guys sink or swim on the basis of their own performance and their own behavior.
Nick Ferrari, a swamp that needs to be drained. I mean, that was the thing that Trevor Kavanagh took on today, and that is the implication of what is being said there.
And I thought
seen in News Corp.
I thought Trevor's piece was fantastic, and I cheered every word. I don't agree. I think maybe Michael's talking about the print side of Britain, although I understand that Rupert Murdoch is still very well thought towards the Sun. He enjoys the Sun. But B-Sky B, the television operation in Britain, is the jewel in the crown.
But there's a distinction.
Right.
There's a distinction there. Remember, B-Sky B is a separate company, and I think that they're going to have problems there in the UK, but that's a separate company.
They already
now
do have.
they're looking at the subsidiary division, which is News International.
Right. Charlotte Harris, a swamp that needs to be drained. Is that the view that you have of the Sun?
If the evidence shows that there's been mass payments to police, inappropriate payments and the sort of things that we have seen with the News of the World, evidence has been destroyed, then it might be that I adopt that metaphor. But with all of these things, you have to be careful that you wait for the charges and you deal with things forensically. In terms of evidence, I think the reason why the police went there in the morning was because when in the same organisation, not the same newspaper, evidence has been destroyed, we've had to go to court on behalf of clients and we've had admissions only in the last year and last week from the police that they didn't do enough. And it's been like getting blood out of a stone, trying to find these emails that implicate people.
Going through the children's pyjamas drawer.
Well, you know, this whole thing about the children's pyjama drawer and the love letters.
Like terrorists,
The Sun have made a lot of money on the private information of others that they have published. And so in Kavanagh's article, no, this has nothing to do with jealousy. In Kavanagh's article, he said they looked at the love letters. They publish other people's love letters and their private information, and that's absolutely fine.
It is payback.
When the hypocrites expose other hypocrites, this is what
you've
happens.
encapsulated it brilliantly. It's payback. Because they've done those kind of stories.
No, it's not payback.
No, you
it's
said
them
it.
being treated like everybody else. The journalists being treated the same way as they treat others.
Forget the reason. Just look at what's going on here. I mean, you might as well face this. You might as well begin to judge what's going to happen in the future on the basis of what's happening now. What is the reality? The reality is that the company itself is turning over evidence which the police are acting on. Now, that would indicate to me that things are probably pretty bad. You have the company and the police on the same page. Yes, the Sun is the odd man out. I would say the Sun is screwed, whether for whatever reasons. And they can be debated, but I think what you are looking at here is a serious situation. I don't think the Sun is going to recover.
Okay. The Sun is screwed.
It's in huge trouble. Rupert Murdoch is here. I don't think he's come over to close it. I think if he had his time over, he might even reconsider the News of the World. It was a shocking decision.
Would you weep if the Sun were to close?
Yes, I would. I'd be very upset.
Now, let me just
hold on a minute, Michael. Hold on a minute. I just want to hear what Charlotte has. You'd be very upset. Was that irony or was it serious?
No, it wasn't irony. And I've said this before. When the News of the World closed down, I remember getting the message. A journalist phoned me and said to me that it had happened. And I sent a message to somebody inside and said, "Are you having a joke? This can't be true." There was. Right. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted them to change. I didn't want them to shut down.
So you actually agree it was a wrong decision on that? That's a rare moment of agreement in this. Michael Wolff, is Rupert Murdoch actually in charge then? Is he the one who's going to decide whether the Sun stays or goes?
You know, I think that's the crux of this, and I don't think he is in charge, not the way he has been in charge for the 60 years he's run this company. I think the pressures on him in the U.S. are enormous, greater than they have ever been, and I think that there are personalities within the company that are nearly as strong as Rupert at this point, and Rupert will be next month 81, by the way. So I think he is fading. I think that he cannot defend his sentimental love anymore. And I think that he is here and the company, his American executives, some who will be here with him, are here to figure out what to do. And the solution I proposed today in The Guardian was, I think, the best alternative that they had, which is to sell the Sun, take that money, put it into a trust for the Times and the Sunday Times,
we'll have to leave it there.
And leave
Michael
Britain with his head held up.
Thank you very much.